and welcome back to the AusCannaPodcast. I'm your host, Christina McMullen, and today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to because it goes beyond products, beyond brands, beyond even policy headlines. It asks a much bigger question. What if medicinal cannabis isn't just about access to a plant? What if it's an opportunity to rethink healthcare altogether? My guest today is Bee Mohamed. Bee is a government relations and advocacy professional working at the intersection of policy and lived experience. Through her work in advocacy and her platform, the MATA Collective, she focuses on shaping systems that actually reflect what people need and not just what legislation allows. She understands how decisions are made in government rooms, but she also understands what it feels like when those decisions land on real people. Today, we're unpacking where the medicinal cannabis industry sits right now in Australia, the power dynamics shifting it, and whether this moment presents a rare opportunity to build something different. If you've ever felt like the system wasn't designed with patients in mind, this conversation is for you. Before we get started, friendly reminder to keep sending in your questions for the rapid fire segment to AusCannaReviews@gmail.com. Be sure to include your mailing address so I know where to send your podcast goodie bag. All right, let's dive right into it. We're going to start with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Bee?
I'm ready.
Let's do this. Early bird or night owl?
100% early bird.
Oh, me too. Like, when you say early, how early are you?
Well, when I lived in Byron, probably like a 5:30. In Melbourne, it's been a bit tricky, I have to say. The sun rises at 7:15 at the moment. But disclaimer, I do have a dog, so that contributes to it as well. But definitely catch me before midday and you'll have the best version of me.
Oh, so true. I joke with people all the time that you are far more likely to get a response from me at 5 a.m. than you are at 5 p.m.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for doing this in the morning.
What is your favorite munchie?
Oh. Okay, look, I do pretend that I'm very healthy and I eat really well, but favorite munchie is Cocoa Pops.
Yeah. Tastes like chocolate milk later when you're drinking.
Yes. I grew up in Singapore, and if they had, is it Captain Crunch?
Yeah.
That was the cereal I sort of grew up with, but you can't get that here in Australia. So yeah, but Cocoa Pops for sure. And then you get the bonus of the chocolate milk after.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, girl. See, now I want to go have a bowl of cereal. Hard truth or diplomatic answer?
Wow, these are good questions. Depending on the person and the environment. Yeah. I do lean towards a more diplomatic way. But if you're a very, very close friend and you're asking me for the hard truth, then I will provide that. So yeah, depending on the situation, I would say. Great question.
I agree with that, though. It's very much about your audience.
Absolutely.
A healthcare system you admire globally?
That's a difficult question. I would say, I'm trying to think who has good medical systems, but then, you know what? I'm going to be biased and just say Australia for now, just because, yeah, what comes to me immediately, we do have a pretty decent healthcare system here. And I think as we talk about some of the advocacy stuff, it's like there is always potential to affect change here. And yeah, so I'm going to say Australia because I was born in Singapore and great healthcare system, but any medicinal use of cannabis means you end up being hung by the death sentence.
I have a listener submitted question, and this comes from Clive in Leeton, New South Wales. And he wants to know, should lived experience be mandatory in regulatory advisory panels?
Wow. What is this guy's name again?
Clive.
Hello, Clive. I mean, are we allowed to say hello?
Yeah, you can give him a shout out. When I read that question, I was like,
what? Yes, this is when we clap. Yes, absolutely. I would have to say that I've been very, very blessed in all of the health policy roles and jobs that I've had, be it in government or outside of government. We've only been able to make any change or affect any change purely because of the lived experiences. So yes, 100% Clive, I agree. It was, for me, a no-brainer. In a lot of the health spaces, you see these advisory committees and panels, and most of the time it's always the AMA, the medical associations, the pharmacy guild, the PSA, and of course, their expertise needs to be heard. But at the end of the day, it is actually the patients that are living through day in and day out with any issues. So I think it definitely should be mandatory. And, it's almost ridiculous that we're still having discussions around health without the lived experience and the stories. But excellent question.
again, shout outs to Clive. That was a brilliant question. I mean, this episode will be coming out hot on the heels of United in Compassion. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But again, I was like, ooh, listeners, we are engaged. Last question. If you weren't in advocacy, what would you be doing?
Oh, wow. We barely started. I'm already questions are amazing. You know what? With everything I've been doing with Marta recently, I wish that I was a photographer. Yeah, I think, we've done really well in capturing stories, through the lens of a film camera, and we make sure it's filmed because you can't really edit that, to be honest. When it's developed, we get it as what it is. And it's one of those things. I've always, obviously being Asian, I've always been quite academic and never been able, I guess, in a way to explore the creative part of me. So I would have loved to have been a photojournalist or something.
I like to say in a previous life, I was a photographer, but it's one of
Ooh.
it's one of those things though that like you kind of touched on just there. It's great when you're in an environment that's surrounded by people that are creative with you, that fuel your creativity. And when you lose that, it's very hard to keep it going. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when you're talking with artists, it is hard to constantly create, constantly come up with new ideas, new ways to see things, new ways to, produce your imagery kind of thing. And so when I left Canada and I moved here, I didn't realize how important that creative group that I had was to my mojo.
Yeah, it's so important. I have to say, I was only able to create Marta because when I moved to Byron, I was suddenly around creators. So had to put my logical brain, aside. But it's so true that who you surround with and people who are creating new things and different things is actually quite important to you creating the self. So yeah, maybe we can start a photography group or something. I don't know.
Girl, don't tempt me. Maybe we should. Maybe I don't know. Hold on. You left Byron. You're down in Melbourne now. I don't want to say Melbourne people aren't creative, but there's something about being in Byron by the beach that just, calls to you, if you will.
God.
I mean, I love my Melbourne listeners. I do. I love you guys. Anyways, segue. Ooh, Bee, I'm really excited to have you on today. I really am, because we've crossed paths kind of in the same circles for a while now, but I've never actually had a chance to sit down with you and talk to you and like get to know you. But you are, we briefly touched on it in rapid fire. You are somebody that is just very active in policy and advocacy. And before we get to our dreams of the future, let's talk about the present and kind of what's happening right now with Australian medicinal cannabis. Like I said, we're just coming out of United in Compassion. That was just a couple of weeks ago. For the listeners that don't know, that's a big conference in Brisbane where basically the whole industry gets together and we talk about things that are happening right now. So yeah. Oof. So much to talk about for sure.
So much to talk about. Yeah. I mean, I was in Brisbane, but I wasn't at the conference. And, I think I sort of was reflecting, I remember the first UIC I went to maybe 6 years ago just before COVID, I went to one and it was so grassroots. It was absolutely amazing. It was the reason why I wanted to get into the medicinal cannabis industry. I was like, it was so heartening to see that patients were at the forefront of it, and it's so funny seeing Jess posted that sort of early days UIC, who the speakers were and everything. And I think we're at the point of this industry now where, gosh, the number of companies and brands and it's really, really, I'm sure, getting overwhelming for patients themselves. It's just spiraled so quickly that, I remember even in leaving Astro Dispensary in my last couple of weeks, like there was just so many products that I was just starting to not, I can't even remember half of it, so we're definitely at the point now where there's definitely no lack of choice of products and brands and types of medications and everything. But I almost feel we are slowly just forgetting why we're here. Like I've always been mindful since day one that I wouldn't be working in this industry if not for patients, because they're the ones that pushed and legalized for this to be possible. So in a way, I wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to work in this space if not for them. So I think we need to bring them back at the forefront. I feel like they're sort of, moving away from us at the moment. And even at UIC, obviously I had updates from some of my peers there and some great presentations for sure. But I would love to hopefully see some sort of patient-led conference or event where they get to drive the conversations. Like I would absolutely love to see that at this stage, at this year, of where we're at 10 years on. Let's bring that back.
Yeah, I did enjoy UIC this year. There were some really good presentations, but I'm with you in the sense that I'd say right now that the patient voice is getting lost. We're not really gaining power, so to speak, in the conversations. I think we're losing our voice in the conversations, almost like we're not even being included anymore. And we're in a reform mode, we're in a consolidation mode, and we're all kind of struggling a bit where there's a huge part of me that's like, come on, let's get back together. Let's get back to, again, I guess the grassroots of it all. Why did we start this? Well, it was started for better access for patients to be able to access a medication that, this is a hill I'll die on. It gives you a quality of life that you didn't have before. And I feel like access is important. And I feel right now that we're losing a little bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel it's starting to be diluted. I do question, even with the recent inquiry that TGA had, was there a patient voice on that expert group? Or like, did the TGA even go, all right, we're going to actually consult the patients about, these issues that are happening?
So that's an interesting thing that you said, because I did attend the Q&A panel that was at the end with the TGA, and they had a slide that was up that there was 600 plus what they were calling patient submissions. And I'm like, okay, that tells you a lot that we're trying to get involved. But then at the same time, I'm going to say it, the questions were kind of bullshit. They were not questions that, I mean, again, I'm somebody that probably knows a little bit more about cannabis than the average patient, right?
Sure.
And those questions that were asked in the consultation, some of them were above my head. I was like, I am not qualified to be answering this. Why should I be answering this? This is not, yes, it's a consultation. Yes, it was open to whoever. Yes, 600 patients answered, but they weren't questions that me as a patient, I should really be answering, right? You weren't really asking for my experience about accessing this medication. You weren't asking for how it was in impacting my life, good or bad.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's sort of hard because, we have a few associations that are meant to represent the industry, the patients and clinicians. But I also feel like, my experience in health policy, when you're trying to affect any change or implement any change, the one thing that usually happens out of respect for patients is your whole focus groups across the country. You gather the patients together in a hall or, super grassroots, and you collect their stories, you collect their testimonials, you collect what's not working. So it's really been interesting that, I don't know, like it's sort of like, why isn't this being pushed? Like, why isn't anyone sort of, well, we're talking about this now, which is amazing, but it's sort of like, why didn't the industry sort of go, wait a second, where is the genuine patient voice and experiences here? So I think they need to be held accountable in a sense, as they sit on these groups. It's like always question like, is there a way that we can ensure that the TGA engages with patients? It's actually not that hard. I hate to say it.
It's not, right? Like sometimes I sit back and I'm like, and again, maybe it is because I'm a patient and I joke all the time that I'm like a quote unquote casual observer of the industry. What do I say? Industry adjacent sometimes, right? That's kind of what I say. But it does seem so simple to me sometimes that I'm like, man, if we just had a little bit of education, if there wasn't so much fear in us talking to have education, we could nip so many things in the bud. Like so many, I don't think we would be so wrapped up on the chase with THC if we could just have conversations about other cannabinoids or again, terpenes. There are so many other active components to the plant that that on some level, I feel like prohibition and everything else, the fallout to that is now we chase THC.
Yeah, I know the whole approach. Everyone's discussing about, is there going to be a THC limit now? Is it going to be limited dosing? It's like the conversation is steered in such a wrong way, and even before we talk about the THC level and everything else, I mean, the drug driving issue, the workplace discrimination, like there's so many issues that patients still struggle with, like so much. So I think, I think in a way we've unfortunately done this to ourselves. I think that's why I agree with you, Christina. Like we need to put that back at the forefront of everything we do, because maybe that's how change actually starts happening the way we want it to be.
I do think that there is a way to have an intersection between policy and lived experience. Like, I don't think that that's a buzzword. I feel like we can do it and we can co-design something beyond the consultation, right?
Yeah.
We can do this.
And this is the thing, it's possible. I've been very, very blessed in over 10 years of health policy. Like, I'll take the most recent example before medicinal cannabis, right? So the prescription medication overdose that was happening in Australia, I was working, it's a weird story. Heath Ledger, when he passed away, his dad actually started a patient advocacy organization because he had thousands of families writing to him and everything. So he started to put his own money into starting a patient advocacy organization. We wanted to address the overprescribing, the overdose fatalities that could have been prevented with some of the medications like opioids and benzodiazepines. After 6 years, we got a $20 million commitment by the minister to implement a real-time prescription monitoring. They rescheduled codeine. They reduced the pack sizes of opioids. And people often ask me, like, how did you guys as an organization do that? And I always say one thing. It was just the stories. You know, I remember one time I brought this family from regional Victoria. They lost their son, Simon, at 30 when he overdosed from an over prescription of painkillers, and all I did was brought them to camera. We had half an hour with the Minister for Health then, which was Greg Hunt. They shared their story. They held a photo of their son, Simon. And at the next COAG, which is that's the meeting that all the health ministers across the states meet, he committed to changing something. He committed to the family, like, we will do something. So I didn't do anything from a policy perspective, all my formal training and uni and everything, it just came down to stories. Like, that's how we affect change. So then we talked about it in the media. We lobbied all the state health ministers. So I think it's not delusional, for you to think that, wait, surely it's possible. It is definitely possible. I think we've just forgotten that we can do this. So I'm slightly more optimistic in that regards.
No, but it's good to be optimistic like that. I do think, it is why I turn the microphone on. It is why I bring guests on, because I do feel like the more we talk about it, the more we reduce the stigma. The more we reduce the stigma, then, other things start to fall into place. Again, easier access, doctors that aren't afraid to prescribe, have the conversation, patients that are willing to have conversation with conservative family members now, and they're not hiding it anymore. Like, it all starts with conversations. And you're so right. At the end of the day, the most powerful thing anybody can do is share their experience, share their story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the thing that I still hang on to after so long, I guess, in health policy is that with the right storytelling, obviously it might be a bit harder because it's cannabis and we're already dealing with so much stigma. But I always say, as a citizen, like, we are sovereign beings and our stories is all we have to share. It's actually as important of wisdom to any clinical trials, to any sort of scientific evidence that's out there. The lived experience should be regarded as valuable as all those things.
How do you think we coexist? Because I feel like we're in what's the word I'm searching for? Commercial growth. I feel like there's a lot of commercial growth going on right now. So how do we marry the commercial growth with the patient experience so we balance things out? Because sometimes I feel like cannabis all of a sudden became this commodity and it's booming and it's great. I love it. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, how can we coexist there with the patient voice?
That's a really good question. It's something I've been reflecting on the last couple of years. I think it's always been hard. I've been very blessed, doing advocacy through Canopy Growth and Astrid, and it's hard because you can only do so much until it becomes commercialized as well, just speaking very candidly. But I think it goes back to a lot of, I hate the buzzword, but it's just corporate social responsibility. I always dream of if there's a way that every company in this space just has a small contribution towards some sort of patient initiative or advocacy group. Obviously Drive Change had that. We were very blessed at the start. Like, when we started, I don't know 6 years ago, I remember me and David Halpin was like, oh yeah, we'll be done in 2 years. It wouldn't be that hard to change the driving laws, but it wouldn't have been possible without the support of industry then. And we were very lucky. But I think now more than ever, it's so much about the bottom line. So even for us, Drive Change, we're starting to expand a lot of our work towards more the harm reduction within cannabis and how important it is to have these conversations. We've been trying for 18 months and there's not a single dime. Like, I've been doing this as a volunteer because no company at the moment wants to invest in any of these things. It's a really weird, I know, I'm seeing your facial.
Like, I wish it was video, and I wish people could see me make my nose is all scrunched up, and I'm like, God, like, why? Because again, this goes back to education helps everybody. Everybody.
I think people were more willing to work together back in the days. I mean, I sound very old now, but back in the days, it's like, yeah, this company, you should talk to them as well. Like, it was all about getting the brands who were being supportive together. Whereas now it's like the questions that are usually asked is, what do we get out of it? And I have a very big problem with companies asking those questions. Because not everything is about the return of investment. And this is when I felt like Canopy early days. I know Canopy has a bit of a bad rap sometimes, but like early days, like we wanted to shift systemic stuff. It wasn't just about shifting, okay, how can we make change just for the company? It was really about shifting some systemic issues. So I think companies need to go back to that, but I just don't know how. This is the one question that I don't have an answer for, because it's been very interesting the last year just approaching companies, and they're like, sorry, we don't have any money. And you're like, you just spent $20,000 on a conference, So I don't know what it is, but I think we need to find a way to do something together.
I'm with you. Like, it's wild sometimes, the people that approach me wanting to come on the podcast.
Right.
Because again, this is, it's a labor of love. I'm self-funded here, right? That this is just, again, like I said earlier, I literally turn on the mic because I like to get the conversation out there. I like to have conversations with interesting people. But it blew me away. There was like maybe a handful of people during UIC who came up to me, whose literal opening line to me was, how do we get on the podcast? And I'm like, yo, bro, how about you start with, hey, Christina, love the podcast. Just caught the one with Helen Kabelos that came out during UIC. It was fabulous. You guys talked about some great things. I would like to talk about blah, blah, blah. Do you think maybe I could be a guest? Come on, throw me a bone. Fucking help me to help you. That's right, I said it. But you know what I'm saying, though? Like, we're giggling and laughing about it, but
No, but that's the reality of
that's
it.
the reality.
It's very much like, what can you do for me? And I'm just like, I came into this industry because I was done for 6 years. All I did was pretty much see people dying from prescription medication overdose. It completely screwed my mental health, completely screwed. And then I remember that was early days where patients suffering from chronic pain were illegally accessing medicinal cannabis. And I was very vocal then about the whole like prescription medication dependency and overdose, and then sort of wanted to come into cannabis because I was like, far out, like we can start giving people the quality of life. Amazing. It was such a beautiful space. And then to see stories like led to the legalization of the sector. So it's weird that we're in this really funky, it's pretty funky, I have to say. And not a great funky, the bad funky.
It is. Well, again, I wish we had video, because you're saying funky and you're scratching up your nose. But it is. Like, again, I think back when I was younger and I was, young and dumb, there was no gatekeeping with information. Like, all the people that I was hanging out with were always very free flowing with, oh, try this or do this or whatever it is. There was I asked some stupid questions in the quote unquote grow room, but I was never like laughed out. They were never like, what the hell are you doing here kind of thing. It was always that's not right. Don't worry, we'll teach you, right? And it was always so collaborative.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like we're not collaborating enough. Damn it, we're just not. Because and together we're more powerful together when we're all fighting for the same thing. Like you just said, when we were all together just pushing for the legalization so we could access it as a medication, we were all fighting the same thing. And now we're nitpicking everything.
Yeah, and I think we saw want to gatekeep a lot of things. I think, again, it's I'm hoping this will change this year. And then it's not only just the commercialization of it, like we're starting to see, now the medical market, it's a mix of the medical and rec market. And so like there's just so many movements in space at the moment that I just sort of feel like, yeah, the model needs to be flipped. Like I almost feel like bloody have a patient conference where the industry come and actually listen. Like come and listen to these stories, because maybe they've been so disconnected from the grassroots. And this is what I loved about working in a street dispensary. It was like, yes, I did advocacy and policy, but every single day I got to speak to patients. I was not disconnected whatsoever. Like, I had times where I was on the phone to police officers trying to educate them about like, this is legal and it's prescribed, and then also helping patients who were unfairly dismissed as work. So it's, I knew day to day like what patients go through, but maybe the reason for the disconnect is like, I don't know, these companies are not face to face with patients as often anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I do think on some level it's partly, and I hate to say it, it's partly because we're doing a little bit of like pharma 2.0 with it, right?
Yeah.
Where like, ooh,
can't speak to patients because of the code of medicine's conduct or like blah, blah, blah. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that, again, if we just sat down at the table with some patients and started talking to them about how they use the plant, how they incorporate it into their lives, how again, it's given them back a quality of life that they didn't have before, because it is a reoccurring theme. The more people you talk to, and again, I don't have conversations about, oh, excuse me, are you having a 30% THC flower in the morning? No.
I mean, talk about the products, right? We don't have to talk about what we just need to share is the lived experience. So industry, once again, understand what patients need. Because like with all these products that are coming out to market, is that based on what patients are asking for? Maybe, but I would love to see how they do the due diligence around this and actually going, well, actually, we've spoken to a group of 20 patients and this is based on, people asking for this. So I think this is the year. I mean, it is the year of the horse, so let's gallop forward and I don't know, find a way. I think, and this is why I started Mata 2 years ago, because I was like, you see all these LinkedIn wars and like people like commenting on each other. And then I remember thinking to myself, if we just stripped back everything and we just sat down and shared the story, like the CEO of this company might seem like a dick to you, but maybe there's a hidden story to why he's doing this. And maybe we have forgotten that story, So I was a bit naive then to be like, oh, if we all tell our stories, we will all get along, maybe. But
Honestly, girl, if we just sat around in a group with the peace pipe and told our stories, we would all get along. I'm just saying.
that's amazing. I think we should do an event called the Peace Pipe.
We should.
We should.
We should. We're looking for funding for our next event called the Peace Pipe, if anybody's listening.
Yes. Call out any companies who are willing. Yeah. We're not asking for much. We can do it in the park. We can bring the pipe. You just have to make sure, like, it's just put your name to something you believe would make change. That's all I'll say.
There you go. We're, again, low bar, people, low bar.
Just $300.
Seriously, get us off the ground. What do you think responsible corporate participation actually looks like? Because I know we're joking here about, let's get our peace pipe event off the ground, but it's hard to balance advocacy and staying ethical when funding is involved, right?
Yeah.
Then how do we get those corporations to participate responsibly?
Yeah, look, I think there's definitely a model that's so possible. I think, everyone being so concerned about TGA and advertising and promotion, the thing people don't realize is when you're actually supporting advocacy. You're supporting systemic change. It is not promotional. It is not advertising. It's purely to shift certain things that are no longer working. And the reality is this happens in a pharmaceutical model already. So, this is why certain pharmaceutical companies support like drug and alcohol organizations purely from an educational and advocacy perspective, because it's not selling a product or anything. So I think this industry, because we've been so, over-regulated and everyone's been smacked on the hand, we've become so worried about what are the implications of supporting advocacy initiatives. So I think we need to be a bit like, okay, like we're supporting a systemic change here. It is nothing to do. And, again, I always say, look outside of the cannabis industry. Companies do this. Like they either commit a percentage of their profits to like certain organizations. It's already happening. It's not rocket science. We're not trying to do something that's not already been done. I think the industry has just been so worried about supporting patients and patient voices and initiatives because they're like, oh, would it go against what the guidelines are? So, draft change is a clear example. Even UIC is a clear example. Like, sort of we got that money, we did what we needed to do. It's possible. It's just we need more of that. We need to make sure that we do that more often. These are all very, very realistic and possible solutions. I think this is when it's up to us to decide, okay, how can we actually start to have these serious conversations and actually look at real tangible outcomes.
I'm with you 100%. I do think everything is possible. We just gotta sit back and have a look at things and readjust because the system is not keeping up to the needs, right?
No, yeah.
It's just not. I mean, it was great at the beginning when it was first implemented, the SASB and everything else. Great, but it's not keeping up to the needs, right? I think we almost need to have a look at like the prescribing models and do a deeper dive into what the prescribing models are. And I think we need to rethink them. Again, we're so stuck on THC, but I'm like, man, if we could just have different conversations around the plant and the prescribing models and, again, if we could change like the access pathways just a little bit, because as as I know, as a lot of patients know, we're literally presenting to doctors where we're like, man, we've tried XYZ and this is my last try. And I don't feel like it should be so hard. Like if we could zoom out for just a second.
Yeah.
And be like, well, how do we remove some of these barriers? How do we make some of these things easier? Again, I think looking at the prescribing model, I think, again, diving into education and getting some of these companies to come to the table. And I think it was during the TGA Q&A session where they admitted, yes, education is lacking. And I think they even said something about there needing to be a video on like how to use your vaporizer, just like basic 101. And I'm like, God, I can't even believe that we're 10 years in and we're like, should we do a video on how to use my dry vaporizer? But the truth is that we're not like, I'm not doing it. Like the other patient advocacy, like we're not doing it because we're like, oh, is that trouble? Are we going to get into trouble if I do a video on this is my mighty and this is how I load my, but it's education that we desperately need.
Absolutely. And I think this is when it's like the fine line, and that's why it needs to go to a patient initiative. It needs to go somewhere else.
What's a small shift that you think could realistically happen within the next 2 years?
Oh, within the next 2 years. I think what we were speaking about before is how do we actually create something within the space that starts to put the lived experiences and the patients at the forefront of what we do. So I think there needs to be a place within the medicinal cannabis, I guess, industry where like patients are truly heard and valued. And that's something that can be done quite easily. I think also with a lot of the conversations that are happening right now, like what we talked about at the start, How do we make sure patients are a part of these, I guess, government conversations and these consultations and everything? So there are I think the low hanging fruits are like, how do we just put the lived experiences back at the forefront of what we're doing?
I like it. Again, so simple, right?
It is simple, I think, again, hopefully when people listen to this conversation today, they reach out to you and being like, wait, so we can support patient initiatives, we can support certain events that, we won't be in trouble for. I think it's just realizing that if you read the fine lines, you're not advertising products or, your brand or trying to push. Like, I think it's also great for patients to actually even know which companies are behind these things. Like, I would say cannabis patients are quite conscientious patients. And so they want to know which brands are supporting initiatives that they face on a day to day.
I think consumers in general are like that, right? I think consumers in general, they do. They want to support things like Aussie grown. They want to support things that, again, companies that give back to causes that are beyond themselves, right? I think we all kind of want to do that on some level and to support players that we think are doing good.
Yeah, and that's why for us, when with the drive train work that I was doing, we were very like vocal about the companies that came to support us, and when we first started the campaign, we were like, these are the brands and the companies, and we were very transparent. We even had an article to say how much they contributed, we were always transparent. So I think as long as we're transparent and we start, having an honest conversation about what's not working and how we do things differently, I feel it's all very possible. I think it just seems a bit bleak at the moment, right? Like every week we're hearing of like another company going into administration or like there's another merger, there's another acquisition. And so we're just in this space where we're just like, oh, like, it's a bit doom and gloom. So let's just maybe shift the narrative and be like, hey, if we all go back to the stories and why we're doing this, maybe it'll help everyone as well.
I totally agree. For the listeners who kind of care deeply about the space, whether they're patients or clinicians or CEO of companies or whoever, what do you think they should be doing right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for patients, I don't know, start sharing your stories on social media platforms. I think these digital platforms do exist for a reason, Again, it might seem so bleak at the moment with AI and everything, but people relate to stories. So keep using your voice, keep using your stories to share that, like how cannabis and the plant has helped you. I guess with the CEOs of companies and clinicians or anyone else, like think about how you can really, really help to like, I guess, affect change in this industry. I think about what has been done in the last 10 years and how we can do it differently. And, if you're a CEO of a company, I'm like, someone be the first company to pledge a certain percentage of their profits to patients and or doing something or legalize, or to the legalized cannabis party or something, like we need to just start like actually supporting the space in general, so and with clinicians, my main ask to clinicians at the moment who are prescribing is just the duty of care. Like I think it's great that patients have access more easily nowadays because of the types of clinics that exist. And, we definitely have an abundance of clinics that we can access medicinal cannabis. But I just ask that we honor the patient for who they are, even if it's a recreational patient. There is such a huge opportunity for harm reduction conversations. It is still a conversation that can be done. Don't sort of push them away and be like, oh, you're recreational, or just prescribe without trying to have a duty of care. So there's some very, very immediate, very non expensive things that we can do Some of these things, it's like we can just implement tomorrow if we wanted to.
Yeah, those are all fabulous calls to action, to be honest. They're all very simple. Before I let you go, can you tell listeners a little bit more about the Mavic Collective? Because you're on Substack, and I will definitely make sure it's in the show notes. But why did you start it?
Yeah, I started because I was just honoring, like where I've come from for, 10, 12 years in health policy. It's actually sharing of stories that leads to change. So I started initially, if I'm being truly honest, I was sharing stories of people in the cannabis industry. I was starting to do, cannabis patients as well. But where it's sort of shifting to now is I'm trying to get into the wider sort of healthcare system, which is, Mata 2.0 after 18 months of just strategy and trying to figure out where my real passion lies is how can we humanize healthcare again? I think for me, we place like so much trust in our clinicians and our practitioners, and so we should, because they've done all the training and they have all the expert knowledge. But I think there needs to be a more balanced healthcare system. And it's weird, like I always was like thinking about the strategy, like healthcare has the word care in it. And how can we just go back to that a little bit, So I think for Mata now, our mission is to humanize healthcare in Australia, hopefully elsewhere. So we're just going to start with actually gathering patients and their clinicians in circles, sharing stories about each other, like actually trying to know the person that's trying to help you, creating just trust, compassion, and empathy, really.
I love it because I think you've done Paul and Kyla.
Yes.
Both, yeah, and they were beautiful write-ups. I love them because, again, these are two people that I've gotten to know since stepping into the industry, and to read the write-ups that you did on them, they were beautiful, and I do think those are conversations that need more oxygen right now, right? People that are doing good things, and like what you're saying, you're trying to bring people together to talk about their lived experience, which is kind of the theme of this whole podcast episode, if people are listening.
Yeah. And, I think people struggle with the long form content nowadays, like that's why for me in Substack, I just have to write because it's sort of, and you're in Substack as well. I think it's so important for us to keep writing and having longer forms because that's how stories are shared. We're so used in this day and age with our 10, 20 seconds videos. And for me, like, I mean, some of the photo shoot, it goes for 3 to 4 hours because we're sharing the stories. And, as we share the stories, we're like, how can we ensure that their lived experience is, I guess, reflected in the images that come through as well. So yeah, I think we'll be focusing a bit more on more patient stories this time around. And, it's, you just never know, right? Sometimes when you're reading a story, you're like, wait a second, I went through exactly the same experience as this person, but, this and this hasn't worked for me. So maybe I should try this. These are the sort of information we're not going to get from a clinic or an interaction with our doctors or pharmacists. So we'll see. I think sometimes it's a bit of a utopian dream, but we can only do what, you almost have to be a bit delusional sometimes to do these things.
Oh, you do. Absolutely. But I don't think long format is dying. I do think there are people out there that still want it. They still want that information. I mean, as somebody that's got a media background who's written for television, radio, and print, you write very differently for those different mediums. And, like television is 2 to 3 minutes and radio is like 30 seconds.
Correct.
But long form print newspaper, that can be 1,000 words, 2,000 words.
Yeah, and that's all wisdom to me, you know. For me, it actually, so mata is I was going to say obviously an Indonesian word, but it is an Indonesian word and it means eyes, you know. And I'm half Indonesian, and I wanted people to just for once put away our polarized views, our judgments, and everything away, and we're just seeing and reading the stories through the lens of that person. You know, I think especially in this day and age, we're so easy to judge. We're so easy to make an opinion of something or someone. So I agree, Christina. I'm like, bring back the long form stories. Let's slow down a little bit and just, yeah. And this is why, yes, it's storytelling, but I want to actually do the face-to-face events because more than ever, I think we need that connection as well. It's all part of getting better. So please reach out if you want to support the Peace Pipe event.
I love it. Look at you make the full circle back. Woo, love it. I really do hope somebody drops into the messages.
It'd be funny if literally a company's like, actually, we really would like to host the first Peace Pipe event.
I love it. We're gonna call it Bee and Christina's Peace Pipe event.
Oh my God. I'll come to Brisbane. I know like Melbourne's not the greatest city in the world, but
look, I'm gonna throw it out there. This is how we're gonna manifest this. We're throwing it out. Let's do the Peace Pipe event during Toowoomba's Carnival of Flowers.
oh wow. I didn't realize they had a carnival of flowers.
Hi, it seems like the perfect Mary for event.
What month is that?
September.
Spring as well.
Exactly.
I love that. Sorry, are we still recording? I was just like having a casual conversation now.
My arm, but that's what this podcast is all about, girl. Casual conversations.
No, that was so good. And it's so funny, isn't it? When you're asking the questions and we're discussing, we're like, these are all such realistic things that can be done. You know, it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Someone needs to do this patient initiative thing.
Oh, yeah, we do. Oh, yeah, we do.
Something needs to happen somehow. So we'll see.
I do feel like 2026 is very much going to be a watch this space, at least from the patient side.
UIC's been great and they've done some great stuff, but it almost needs to be a shift in this space to people who have actually remained engaged with the grassroots and the patients and their communities.
It has been an absolute pleasure chit-chatting with you. Thank you for coming on the show.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything you do for the space as well. I think sometimes it's important to just pause and acknowledge like the work that we sort of do, you know, to just push the conversation a little bit. So
it's important work, girl. It's important work. We're both doing important things out there.
Absolutely. And try to get some Cocoa Pops this weekend.
And that's a wrap for this episode. A big thank you to Bee for joining me today. And a reminder that you can follow her work on Substack at the Mata Collective and on her website of the same name, both of which are in the show notes. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be forever grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review or share it with someone who might enjoy it as much as you. You can also support the show directly at buymeacoffee.com/AusCannaPodcast. This space is evolving quickly, and conversations like this matter. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, your time on Earth is limited, so don't try to age with grace. Age with mischief, audacity, and a great story to tell.